When I was studying philosophy of religion at Trinity Evangelical Divinity School, doing my master's degree there, one of my classmates told me a story about how he stopped by a gas station in Highland Park near the seminary to fill up his car, and he got to talking with the gasoline station attendant. And the gas station attendant asked my classmate what he does. And my friend said, well, I study philosophy. And the gas station attendant said, oh, so you're going to be a shrink, huh? And my friend said, no, that's psychology. I study philosophy, like Plato and Aristotle. And the gas station attendant said, oh, yeah, they were shrinks too. Well, it seems like anybody can be a philosopher these days. I remember hearing some time ago Chris Christopherson described as a philosopher. And this week there was an article released by CNN entitled Philosopher, Why We Should Ditch Religion. And I wondered, who is this philosopher that's saying we should ditch religion? Well, it turns out that it's Sam Harris. And I was surprised to hear Sam Harris described as a philosopher. He's one of the new atheists. He's a neurologist, but apparently now he's also a philosopher. The story says, quote, for the world to tackle truly important problems, people have to stop looking to religion to guide their moral compasses. The philosopher, Sam Harris, told CNN. Quote, we should be talking about real problems like nuclear proliferation and genocide and poverty and the crisis in education, end quote. Harris said in a recent interview at the TED conference in Long Beach, California. TED is a nonprofit group dedicated to ideas worth spreading. They bring in speakers to talk about new ideas that need to be made more popular and spread through the culture. So Sam Harris was there speaking at this TED conference. Quote from Harris, these are issues which tremendous swings in human well-being depend on, and it's not at the center of our moral concern. Religion causes people to fixate on issues of lesser importance, said Harris, a well-known secularist, philosopher, and neuroscientist who is the author of the books The End of Faith and Letter to a Christian Nation. Quote, religion has convinced us that there's something else entirely other than concerns about suffering. There's concerns about what God wants. There's concerns about what's going to happen in the afterlife, he said. Now, these concerns, of course, will be empty and meaningless and unimportant only if religion is false, right? After all, if religion is true, if Christianity is true, then it would seem to me to be of paramount importance to ask whether or not God exists and where you're going to spend eternity. You're going to be dead a lot longer than you're going to be alive on this planet. And therefore, these would seem to me to be issues of paramount importance. Concerns about what God wants and what the afterlife is like and what will happen there. So really, the whole program that he's announcing just presupposes the truth of atheism. So he's saying, given that atheism is true, there are more important concerns than religious concerns. Well, of course, but the question is, well, I think that atheism is true. He's begging the question in favor of his worldview and then declaring that whatever conflicts with his worldview is unimportant. Moreover, I'm a little surprised that he says that religion has led us to be concerned about things other than suffering. Anybody who knows anything about Western history and contemporary demographics know that Christianity has been the most powerful force in the history of mankind for the alleviation of human suffering. The modern education and founding of the universities, hospitals, the nursing profession, medical care, all of these have sprung out of a Christian concern to alleviate the suffering of the world. One of my professors once put it this way. He said, there aren't very many humanistic leper colonies. And I thought that really captured it nicely. Who founds leper colonies? It's the church who cares about those who suffer. In fact, there was some time ago a book recently appeared called Who Really Cares? And in this book, the author demonstrated through surveys that have been conducted in the United States that the people who volunteer their time the most, who give the largest percentage of their incomes, who donate blood most often, are religious people. It's not the secularists who do those things. It's overwhelmingly religious people. So religion, far from diverting attention to the needs of the suffering, has been a tremendous motivating force for the alleviation of suffering. Well, Harris goes on to say, therefore, we talk about things like gay marriage as if it's the greatest problem of the 21st century. We even have a liberal president who ostensibly is against gay marriage because his faith tells him it's an abomination. It's completely insane. Well, now, I don't know of anybody who thinks that gay marriage is the most important moral issue facing mankind today. Certainly, for example, the genocide going on against the unborn, I think, is more important than the issue of gay marriage. But even given that, the preservation of the family as a fundamental unit of society, I think, is a vitally important issue, because if the family goes, the whole structure of society will unravel. So if it's true that gay marriage would be something that would undermine traditional marriage, as many gay activists themselves admit and say, then that certainly is, I think, a legitimate moral concern along with all the others. Harris also said, people should not be afraid to declare that certain acts are right and others are wrong. A person who would spill battery acid on a girl for trying to learn to read, for instance, he said, is objectively wrong by scientific standards. Very interesting. He's talking there about the Taliban abuse of women for example, trying to become literate and throwing acid on them. If you've ever seen these pictures on the internet, they are absolutely horrific. And we can applaud Harris for saying that these acts are objectively wrong. They certainly are. But, of course, the issue is, how can you say that on an atheistic, naturalistic worldview, where moral values are just the spin-offs of the socio-biological evolutionary process? On what basis does he say that one culture's values are inferior to another culture's values? Why is the values of the Taliban or of Afrikaner of South Africa, which propounded apartheid, or National Socialist Germany with its Nazi fascism, why are those cultures wrong as opposed to Western liberal democracies? Well, Harris says they're wrong by scientific standards. But science is morally neutral. Science can't make ethical statements. It can't say what is right and wrong, what is good and evil. Take a Nazi scientist at one of the death camps during World War II, like Joseph Mengele, who performed medical experiments on human prisoners. How could you show a Nazi scientist that what he was doing was morally wrong scientifically? What experiments could you perform to show him that what he was doing was morally wrong? Well, there isn't anything you could do scientifically. Moral values aren't found in a test tube. Moral values are a totally different realm from science, and therefore science is simply neutral with respect to these. And that raises the question then, of course, where do you found your moral values, especially on naturalism? On scientific naturalism, moral values are just illusions of the human species, which has evolved certain behavior patterns that are useful in our struggle for survival. Well, Sam Harris says, quote, "It's not our job to not judge it and say, well, to each his own. Everyone has to work out their own strategy for human fulfillment. That's just not true," he said. "There's people who are wrong about human fulfillment." And I think we couldn't agree more that that certainly is the case. The question is, on what basis do you judge that another person is wrong about his vision of human fulfillment and you are right? Without God, it's hard to see that there's any objective basis for those kind of moral judgments.